one of the reasons why people find liberals so annoying is because they know that on some level, they are unprincipled hypocrites who like to moralize when out of power while being unbelievable cowards while in power. This is never more true than when it comes to immigration. When Trump was president, how many lawn signs did you see in front of nice suburban houses that said, "Immigrants welcome here"? When Trump was in power, do-goody liberals like to yell about the kids in cages. Well, now that Democrats are in power, we get to learn just how welcome those immigrants really are.
Beneath this border bridge in Del Rio, Texas, a group of migrants grows by the hour. The men, women, and children, mostly from Haiti. Tonight, they number nearly 15,000, tripling in size since Wednesday. All waiting in near 100-degree heat, washing clothes in the Rio Grande and sleeping outside for a chance to claim asylum.
Yep. Haiti has been in a deep crisis in the wake of a presidential assassination, which was carried out by mercenaries working for an American firm, and a devastating earthquake that killed thousands of people. And now many of them are trying to come across the border into the United States, where they were met with men on horses and whips.
Hey, no. No! Hey, you use your women? This is why your country because you use your women for this. You go, that way.
Now, the Biden policy towards these asylum seekers has essentially been to deport them without a hearing. According to The Intercept, less than a year after entering office with vows to bring a new humanitarian approach to the nation's immigration system, the Biden administration is carrying out what could be the largest mass expulsion of would-be asylum seekers in recent American history. Virtually none of those being removed from the country, nearly all of whom are Black, have received their day in court, nor will they under the administration's current plan. This is, of course, a violation of international law. Not that the U.S. really gives a shit about international law, at least it comes when it comes to their actions. But the legal rationale that they're using to deport these asylum seekers is something called Title 42. Again, from The Intercept. Since 2016, DHS has deployed a series of policies and strategies that have vastly diminished the potential for families or individuals to seek asylum at the nation's ports. Under the most sweeping of those policies, known as Title 42, DHS has summarily expelled border-crossing individuals from the country without a hearing, regardless of whether they are seeking asylum, a right enshrined under domestic and international law, and without establishing whether being returned to their country of origin poses a risk to their safety. Ostensibly a public health statute, Title 42 was pushed through by Trump immigration advisor Stephen Miller over the objections of career public health professionals in March of 2020. So Title 42, the policy that the Biden administration is implementing, was designed by none other than Stephen Miller himself. Now watch White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who liberal journalists have been embarrassingly fawning over for months, defend the administration's use of Title 42.
Now, anyone who is here before then may be eligible for temporary protected status, and we're looking into that. People may be eligible for that. But right now, we also have to implement our laws at the border. We also want to protect people, both in that community, but also migrants. One of the challenges, as we're all facing a pandemic here, is the gathering of so many people. We're still implementing Title 42, which means that we are going to send people out of the country who come in as we implement that.
A COVID safety protocol.
Exactly.
But did you say that it's possible that extension that applies to Haitians already here could apply to those coming across the border now?
Well, Tony, it's already been extended because of the turmoil on the ground. It was earlier this summer. That's something that the Secretary of Homeland Security and Secretary of State do look into. But again, as we look to the photos, not just the ones you referenced, but of all of these families and people under the bridges, we wanted to also take steps to implement our laws and to protect a lot of them from the spread of COVID as well.
Now, under Trump, 440,000 asylum seekers were deported without trial under Title 42. Under Biden, that number is 690,000 in less than 1 year. Now, in the wake of all this, the special U.S. envoy to Haiti, a guy named Daniel Foote, was so disgusted that he resigned.
The migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border sparked a dramatic diplomatic rebuke on Thursday as the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned in protest to what he called the inhumane treatment of thousands of Haitian refugees. In a blistering letter to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, diplomat Daniel Foote said, quote, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants."
Now, his resignation letter is quite remarkable and worth quoting extensively. He wrote, quote, "Haitians need immediate assistance to restore the government's ability to neutralize the gangs and restore order through the national police. They need a true agreement across society and political actors with international support to chart a timely path to the democratic selection of their next president and parliament. They need humanitarian assistance, money to deliver COVID vaccines, and so many other things. But what our Haitian friends really want and need is the opportunity to chart their own course without international puppeteering and favored candidates, but with genuine support for that course. I do not believe that Haiti can enjoy stability until her citizens have the dignity of truly choosing their own leaders fairly and acceptably." Last week, the U.S. and other embassies in Port-au-Prince issued another public statement of support for the unelected de facto Prime Minister, Dr. Ariel Henry, as interim leader of Haiti, and have continued to tout his political agreement over another broader, earlier accord shepherded by civil society. The hubris that makes us believe we should pick the winner again is impressive. This cycle of international political interventions in Haiti has consistently produced catastrophic results. More negative impacts to Haiti will have calamitous consequences not only to Haiti, but in the United States and our neighbors in the hemisphere. Now, the administration's response to Daniel Foote has been predictably disgusting. Hilariously, they essentially accused him of toxic masculinity and mansplaining. PBS's White House correspondent Jamish Alcindor tweeted out, quote, "A senior Biden administration official also claims Foote was a toxic personality and that Foote would often shout people down and cut people off. But the official also said Foote, a career Foreign Service member, was not facing any form of disciplinary action for the alleged actions." Now, it's worth reminding everyone that the Jovenel Moïse, who served as president of Haiti since 2017, was assassinated in a commando raid in his own home. Well, go back to one of Daniel Foote's complaints in his resignation letter. He said, "Last week, the U.S. and other embassies in Port-au-Prince issued another public statement of support for the unelected de facto Prime Minister, Dr. Ariel Henry, as interim leader of Haiti, and have continued to tout his political agreement over another broader, earlier accord shepherded by civil society. The hubris that makes us believe we should pick the winner again is impressive." Now, perhaps the reason why Daniel Foote was so opposed to American support for the unelected Ariel Henry is that it looks like he was involved in the assassination plot.
Joining us now from New York is Kim Ives. He's the editor at Haiti Liberté. Thanks for joining us. Now, it was stunning enough, the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. Now you have these allegations against the prime minister by the prosecutor who was just sacked. Are these allegations against Henry credible, that he could have been complicit in that murder?
Well, they seem pretty credible. It's coming from the metadata of the phone that he had. He spoke to the guy who told the triggermen to shoot President Moïse. He spoke, this was a guy called Joseph Félix Badiou, who is a fugitive. But Badiou called him at 4:03 and 4:20 a.m., 3 hours after the killing of Moïse. So this is pretty damning. He's got a lot of explaining to do about that. And that's what Bedford Claude was calling him in to talk about. But now he fired Bedford Claude, as well as probably the Justice Minister and the head of the Council of Ministers as well. So it's a real power struggle going on.
Now, it would not be entirely surprising if some elements of the United States government at least knew about the plan to murder Moïse and gave tacit approval of it. That's because the United States has been deeply involved in Haitian affairs for well over 100 years. I think most Americans, and even a good chunk of American leftists, would be surprised to learn that the United States occupied Haiti militarily for the 2 decades between 1915 and 1934, essentially to let American financial interests plunder the country.
To counter this influence, the U.S. sponsored a New York-run group of investors to buy out the only national bank in Haiti, which would effectively put the nation's commerce under American investor control. In December of 1914, the U.S. military seized the Haitian government's gold reserve and transferred it to the investors' bankers, as well as slightly assist Jean-Fabre-Guillaume, or just Sam, in becoming president in February the following year. Sam turned his presidency into a dictatorship 5 months later and ordered the execution of 167 political rivals, all of which were from the predominant families with German connections. Sam was killed by a mob in Port-au-Prince as soon as they learned of the executions. The United States regarded what had turned into an anti-American revolt against Sam as a threat to American business interests in the country, and sent forces to occupy the nation immediately. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson ordered 330 U.S. Marines to occupy Port-au-Prince on July the 25th. Wilson also aimed to rewrite the Haitian Constitution as it banned foreign ownership of land, but he wanted to replace it with one that guaranteed American financial control over the markets. As soon as U.S. Marines landed on the island, various groups fought against them and the later established island government for years. This period is referred to as the Callao Wars, named after the band of peasant militia that largely made up these rebellious bands. It wasn't until the last Marines left in 1934 that these skirmishes and battles finally settled. In September of 1915, the U.S. Senate ratified the Haitian-American Convention, a treaty granting the United States security and economic oversight of Haiti for a 10-year period, and the U.S. representatives had total veto power over the Haitian government. Within 6 weeks of the occupation, the U.S. government seized control of Haiti's custom houses, including the banks and the national treasury. Under governmental control, a total of 40% of Haitians' national income was designated to repay debts to American and French banks, and would control Haitian external finances until 1947.
40% of Haiti's national income was used to pay back debts to American and French banks. That is crazy. But lest you think that that is all ancient history, all in the past, the kind of thing that happened in black and white documentaries, well, the reality is that the United States has been directly involved in Haiti till this very day.
But even after the occupation, the United States continued to play a role in the internal affairs of Haiti. In 1957, the US government threw its support behind a Haitian dictator, François Duvalier. Duvalier and his successor, aka his son Jean-Claude, ate up aid from the United States in exchange for their strong anti-communist stand at the height of the Cold War. Haitian uprisings ended Duvalier Jr.'s rule and led to Haiti choosing its democratically elected leader, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, in 1990. But within a year, Aristide's government was toppled by a coup. Not only was one of the leaders of the coup on the CIA's payroll, but the US had set up and funded the Haitian military and National Intelligence Service, which both played key roles in the coup. Ousted Aristide returned to his second presidency in 2001, and again was forced out of office by a coup that he claimed the US had orchestrated. And after that, President Obama's cabinet pressured a Haitian presidential candidate to withdraw in 2010.
We see reports coming out of various civil society organizations saying that Haitians have lost faith in the electoral process because it doesn't reflect their actual concerns.
So the United States has spent well over a century raping Haiti on behalf of financial interests, making Haiti the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Mired in a deep political and social crisis, ravaged by armed gangs, and with basically no infrastructure, it was that context in which natural disasters hit, one right after the other.
The damage here, unimaginable. The earthquake shearing off sides of mountains, pulverizing tens of thousands of homes, and killing around 2,000 people. With roads impassable, some of the dead had to be ridden out of villages on the backs of motorbikes.
The earthquake tore this voodoo temple right off the mountain. Now, these firefighters have been working here for 2 days now. They believe there are more bodies in the rubble, and this goes on for house after house.
Hospitals gutted by the quake are filled with patients, many of them in tents or hallways. The Coast Guard medevacing over 100 patients, but even today, those injured in the quake continue arriving at the hospital.
Okay, does your neck hurt?
This is one of the patients who continues to trickle into hospitals like this. Survivors of the earthquake. He has a double pelvic fracture who have been suffering for days without medical care. And tonight, like Lucia, hundreds of thousands remain homeless. And just 36 hours after Tropical Storm Grace plowed through here, these quake victims getting soaked as they waited for care at a hospital. Hundreds of others hunkering down in the soccer field amid downpours bringing up to 15 inches of rain.
It's not good here by the coast. My home was destroyed. I have nothing to use to sleep. Look, there's a lot of children here. I really have nothing.
So it's after all that a few thousand Haitians want to come into our country, and our response is to send men on horseback to whip families trying to cross a dangerous river. But don't worry, Vice President Kamala Harris promised to look into the matter.
Madam Vice President, do you have any reaction to the Border Patrol agents using horse reins to rein in Haitian migrants down at the southern border?
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way. And I'm deeply troubled about it. And I'll also be talking to Secretary Mayorkas today about it.
Yeah, it's your classic Democrat. We're going to look into it. We're going to do a thorough investigation. We're going to form a committee. I'm deeply troubled by all this, even though I'm in a position of incredible power. This thing shouldn't be happening. Well, the good thing is that now we have the results of that investigation.
So what he has asked all of us to convey clearly to people who are understandably have questions, are passionate, are concerned, as we are about the images that we have seen, is one, we feel those images are horrible and horrific. There is an investigation the president certainly supports, overseen by the Department of Homeland Security, which he has conveyed will happen quickly. I can also convey to you that the secretary also conveyed to civil rights leaders earlier this morning that we would no longer be using horses in Del Rio. So that is something, a policy change that has been made in response.
There you have it. That should solve it. There are no more horses. That's the real issues, the horses. The Democrats once again resort to what amounts to cosmetic changes that will make them feel less icky about the whole thing while not addressing any of the meat of the issue and generally just being brazen hypocrites. Now, there's this conventional wisdom out there that Republicans are the xenophobic party while the Democrats are the humane and tolerant ones who say Black Lives Matter and immigrants welcome here. Now, the right loses their mind saying that Democrats support open borders and are just begging hordes of people to come into the country. Nothing could be further from the truth. The phenomenon of border militarization started under Bill Clinton in the 1990s in the wake of NAFTA. The administration knew that the so-called free trade agreement would push millions of people in Central America off the land and lead to a migration crisis. And it was friend of the show, Rahm Emanuel, who designed the policy to harden the border and deport millions of people. This is from NBC Chicago. Quote, a batch of 90s-era White House memos from Rahm Emanuel to former President Bill Clinton reveal a shrewd political mind motivated by messaging rather than ideology. The documents posted on the Chicago Sun-Times website were recently made public among the archives at Clinton's presidential library in Arkansas after 12 years of concealment. They show the 54-year-old Chicago mayor, a senior advisor to Clinton circa 1993 to 1998, urging the president to crack down on undocumented immigrants and take a stronger stand on combating crime as part of a strategy to appropriate GOP platforms for political gain. In a November 1996 memo on national policy, Emanuel advised Clinton, then starting his second term, to add more immigration hearings across 6 states, Illinois included, so that he could claim and achieve record deportations of criminal aliens. You know, this comes after the fact that in 1986, Ronald Reagan actually passed a pretty sweeping amnesty bill for immigrants. And it was NAFTA that really changed the game. For the free trade agreements to work in the eyes of capital, you need to force the free flow of capital across borders, but you need to stop the free flow of people. That way, capital can keep wages low. So border militarization obviously ramped up under Bush in the wake of September 11th, but Obama took it to heights hitherto unseen, deporting more people than all previous presidents combined. Trump then did the kids in cages thing, and now Biden is sending in the horsewhips. So any humane response to the situation in Haiti starts with stopping any more interventions there and allowing them to develop economically on their own terms. It also starts with processing these migrants humanely. It is the absolute least we can do after destroying the oldest Black republic in the world, a republic that was founded by slaves who threw off their shackles and broke away from their masters. For that crime, they have been forced to pay, literally, ever since. It needs to stop now.
As always, you nail it when it comes to providing historical context into what we're experiencing today, especially with the migrant crisis. And that was excellent. So the thing that really stands out to me, like a broader point I want to make about the Democratic Party, is that, man, they really absolutely need to pass legislation that materially improves the lives of working Americans, because the only thing they've been able to rely on campaign-wise is the very moralizing and weaponizing that they've done in regard to culture war issues, in regard to immigration. It's been their whole identity and what they kind of focus on in every campaign that you see. Now, obviously, there are progressive candidates, people like Bernie Sanders, for instance, who's done a great job focusing on the economic issues. But for the most part, when we're talking about corporate Democrats, the only way that they've really succeeded, I guess, in differentiating themselves from Republicans is by pretending to be, warriors for equality, the type of representatives who would fight for the kind treatment of migrants at the border. And all of that is being proven complete and utter BS over and over again. I don't think voters are going to fall for it, right? Like, there are some voters right now who were super vociferous toward the Trump administration and its cruel immigration policies. And today, you're not seeing them so upset about what the Biden administration is doing. But there is a divide, I think, among the Democratic electorate. And we first started seeing it during the 2016 general election. People are not buying it anymore, right? And they want something to vote in favor of, something substantive to be in favor of, other than constantly weaponizing identity politics, which honestly I think Democrats have done in regard to immigration, right? It's got that identity politics, angle to it. And the reason why people are so, I guess, tired of identity politics is because it's used as a tool or a weapon by Democratic campaigns. It's not about actually substantively improving the lives of the very people they claim they want to improve the lives of. A perfect example is the police reform bill that's done. It's going nowhere. We got a story yesterday about how Cory Booker just can't get the Senate Republicans on board with the police reform bill. Well, yeah, we know that. If you really wanted to pass police reform, if you actually were concerned about it, you would fight like hell to get rid of the legislative filibuster and you'd pass it with Democrats. But he's not willing to do that. So again, it's when they use disenfranchised groups of people as a campaigning tool, rather than really genuinely caring about people and wanting to do something that benefits their lives. That's the thing that's,
Yeah. I find identity politics to be superficially annoying, like most people, I think, just it's just annoying. But what I find grotesque about it is that it's if they were to actually do the identity politics, if they actually were to follow through and do the things, I'd be fine with it, because I could take the superficial annoyingness of it, because maybe they would actually see thousands of Black families swimming across a river and being we've been saying Black Lives Matter in our head over and over again for the past 3 years. Right. Maybe that this is a good opportunity for us to actually follow through on that, and then I'd be that's good, But they're so obviously full of shit, they're so obviously hypocritical, they're so obviously empty that I find the whole thing just so grotesque, because again, it's just there's a certain coherence to the Republican. The Republican agenda is incredibly unpopular. Not just their economic agenda, their social agenda is overall unpopular. Most Americans reject the right wing's social agenda, but there is an element in which there is a sort of internal coherence to them, in which that they're not as full of shit as the Democrats. You know, they don't make people feel like they're morally bad for doing anything. You know, like they allow people to just kind of be who they want to be, and that gives them a huge amount of electoral oomph that Democrats kind of lack, because people assume Democrats are just lying to them, and that they're not, and that they're lying to themselves when they say things like, you know, immigrants welcome here.
Well, okay, to that point, I mean, I think the Republican Party is abundantly clear about what their immigration policy is, right? And with Biden, I don't know what he's doing, right? It seems like he's kind of trying to straddle both sides, hoping that maybe he'll get credit from the right wing on being a hardliner on immigration, while rhetorically pleasing, you know, Democrats, and I'm talking about voters here, by maybe not using the type of, I don't know, adversarial language that you'd get from someone like Donald Trump. But all he's doing is infuriating everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't know what, like, how exactly is Joe Biden's immigration policy different of that, different from Trump's? I don't know.
It's not. It's
right?
absolutely not. It's just in the grand scheme of things, it's absolutely not. It's in some ways it's worse, you know. Like, and
in terms of deportation, it certainly is so far.
Yeah, and again, I you know, and listen, like the people like talk about the Hispanic vote a lot, and it's something that I looked at a lot when I was at Univision. And on the one hand, Hispanic voters care about more things than immigration, but on the other hand, it's hard not to notice that when Bush Jr. in 2004 came out strongly for comprehensive immigration reform, he won almost 50% of the Hispanic vote as a Republican. That is crazy to think about. You know, he won almost 50% of the Hispanic vote. He was a Texas governor. He spoke a little Spanish, but he also supported comprehensive immigration reform pretty aggressively. And he won close to 50% of the Hispanic vote. Now, Democrats who just claim they're pro-immigrant, just when they're in power, they do these insane things. Like Obama deported an unbelievable amount of people. It's one of like his greatest crimes. I mean, like millions and millions of people uprooted from the United States and sent back to Central America. I mean, it's just when you think about it for a second, you're like, Jesus Christ, like that is like a mass forced movement of millions of people. And he got you know, politically zero, like it affected him zero. There's no other way to see it as something that they just want to do, that they just believe in some way, because like there is no political argument for it. It makes no sense. You won't get any brownie points as a Democrat if you're doing that. You just will not. You won't. They won't believe it. The right wing will not believe it. And they still believe that Biden is like this open borders radical.
Yeah, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard argues that we have open borders right now as we speak.
Oh yeah,
like,
Tulsi Gabbard was tweeting about how she. I mean, I wish I thought about including the tweet, but like I thought it would be a distraction. But she was arguing that we should bring back the Trump era immigration policies. Tulsi Gabbard.
It's amazing.
And it's just, again, like, so you're not going to get any points. So just do the right thing. Just do the right thing for once in your goddamn life. If you enjoyed this video from Jacobin Weekends, please hit like and subscribe. That way, you'll enjoy all of our backlog, as well as all of our future content, including interviews, live streams, and clips. Thank you.